We have on this panel a world-class group of people that have been thinking through how do we combine information technology and design in cities to bring about better cities. And the premise of our panel is we kind of already know that people are creating smarter cities. And what we're interested in today is a bit of that design process because cities, the great cities are built organically. When you try to build a city top-down in too organized a manner, you kind of end up with Brasilia. And by the way, the same is true in computer architecture. If you try to architect something top-down, it's rigid. And the most interesting things we've seen recently have been emergent and organic, and the most interesting part of the internet has been the whole social engagement part. So what this panel is about is, as we consider smart cities, how do we make that movement be something that is inclusive and that citizens and entrepreneurs and hackers all have a role in playing with the stuff that makes smarter cities, whether it's open data or the design, and how do we include them in that process? Because it's easy to think of this as something that, IBM or Siemens goes to your city, sells something, and top-down something smart emerges. But that's not going to give us the best, most amazing environment. What really gets interesting is what does it mean to make this stuff inclusive? So, for example, in the Bay Area, where we have Gray Area Foundation for the Arts, I've been amazed when we've run urban hackathons and have had designers, artists, journalists, and creators create stuff, what can happen. So it's that spirit that we want to get into today. And so we're going to have our folks each present some interesting works in that space. And then we want to get into a conversation about how do we engage people? I mean, is there a different role for government? Is there a different role for the private sector and for entrepreneurs as we kind of open these things up? So we have today Krauthausen, who has been an innovator all of his life and has kind of always been focused on change and has created both a very prominent recycling project in Germany and now is focused on wheelmap.org that takes a look, as you'll see in a moment, in how folks who look at the world from the perspective of wheelchairs can feed back on their environment and improve things and get the attention of cities. We have Alexander Mankowsky, who is a sociologist from Weimar, who has looked at how does mobility emerge and what are the historical patterns that we can use taking a look into the future. And then we have the two leaders of the Sensible Cities Lab from MIT, Carlo Ratti and Asaf Biderman, who have this wonderful experimental approach building projects around the world. And finally, Dennis Crowley, who has been innovating in what does it mean to build location-based activities, which as a platform, Foursquare can do anything, and one whole area is how does it affect and impact governance. So what an exciting group. So to kick things off, I'm going to throw it over to you, Raul, and tell us a little bit about wheelhouse.org and tell me when to advance the slides.
Okay, so the first picture I brought to you is in German. It means people in a wheelchair have to go around the corner and ring the bell because there's no wheelchair accessible entrance. So what we are doing from the foundation, Sozialhelden, when you translate it into English, it means social heroes. What we are doing is in a kind of usable way, social innovation. It's not about social media, well also, but not only. It's about really making solutions for social problems, real life, offline, analog problems. So the next chart is the map we constructed, well, we developed. It's called Wheelmap. It's an open data, open street map, crowdsourced, whatever map. And what we're actually doing is to map places, points of interest, cafes, bars, museums, whatever, whether they are wheelchair accessible or not. So, as we can here see, is Munich, and the Spielzeugmuseum is not wheelchair accessible, someone mapped. So, it's good for me to know that I shouldn't go there, because it would be, it would be difficult to get inside. I'm very happy that this building is wheelchair accessible, and they also brought a ramp that I could get here on stage. The next slide is a picture of what happens when a wheelchair driver stands in front of an entrance of a building. In this case, it's a girl, and she wanted to get into this cafe. And I know her, she lives in Berlin, and we were testing with her the application of Wheel Map. And what we are doing is we have an iPhone app. It's the next slide, I think. We have an iPhone app where people can tag places in every city of the world where OpenStreetMap is available, because we are using open data. And that's the reason why I'm here at the Responsive Cities panel, because it's about the people. We want to build up an inclusive society, at least politically it's the aim, and maybe we can use technology to engage those people to do it. And we are currently searching for fundings. It doesn't matter whether governments or EU or companies that cooperate with us, because it's all about usability. So it's not about gaining data via a terminal shell. We want to make it feasible, usable, and maybe we can cooperate with Foursquare or something like that, so that it's, by checking into a location, you could also tag whether the location you are inside is wheelchair accessible. So why not make out of a game out of it? That's basically the idea. The next slide is just another screenshot of the iPhone app where you can sort places by accessibility near you.
Hey, I have a question for you. As you start to do this and you start highlighting what is and isn't accessible, does that start to build political will so the city starts responding and you can prioritize where these things need to be changed?
Actually, we are working on that. We call it the blacklist of places that are not accessible. We also plan to make kind of competitions between cities. So how accessible is Berlin in comparison to London, for example? We really want to launch our product internationally on the Paralympics in London, because it's a good reason when people with disabilities are traveling through the world to gain a focus on that. Because we know there are not so many people with disabilities in the world, but in Germany we have 1.6 million wheelchair drivers. And in the world we have 85 million, and there are some organizations, they say that it's 3 times higher, the number, because a lot of people can't afford a wheelchair. So it's a big, how to say, target group, as the business guys call it. In Germany, 1.6 million is a market. It's a market for wheelchair developers.
Well, you know, this reminds me that in a way this is a microcosm of the use of mobile social technology, because it opens, you know, you classically say you can't fight City Hall or no one listens, but mobile technology opens it up. I wanted to show you something this reminded me of. My friends in LA created City Sourced. It's an iPhone app, and the idea is as you walk around and you see something you don't like there's graffiti there, you take the picture, you tag it as graffiti, it sends off the GPS, and now you're telling your government where there's something you don't like. Now what they did is they built this thing out, and then the government, and they had like the email addresses of all the city council. And so rather than everybody get an email, what they now do is they sell a back-end system. So cities like San Jose have this system that basically imports all this data. And for example, what this thing shows is it turns out there's a much greater incidence of graffiti tagging in the summer when schools are out. But they're now beginning to use this as a way that citizens can input what they care about, what they're prioritizing, whether it's graffiti, potholes, or crime. The flip side is they're not yet using this for like gangs, because you don't want to identify maybe who is reporting a crime if they're going to get back at you. But it is a great example of kind of opening something up. So thanks.
But I just want to add some point. We also know that if only a few wheelchair drivers are having an iPhone. So that's really a problem. When we talk about software on mobile phones, we have also to think about different platforms, and it's not only one iPhone app that solves the problem.
That's correct. And in fact, it needs to be part of a big system, and you know, this is the typical cross between lots of discrete things going on and what does the system look like. Yeah. Let's talk, let me throw it over to you, Alexander, because you've thought a lot about, in the world of mobility, kind of what we've learned over 100 years, and that may paint a path for how we plan now.
Yeah, okay, I have to watch my slides while talking. Yeah, first thing, I see it here.
There's a monitor over there also.
Oh, I like it this way.
That's great.
You can lean over.
The movement, huh? I don't like sitting. Yeah, thank you for that, for this extreme useful application, I think, and extremely interesting. And it makes a good jump to this one. How do we think from Mercedes-Benz? How do we think we will put the mobilities? How could we develop or help to build mobility styles of the future? One item is written in the first line. It's mobile quality of life. That's exactly what Raoul talking about, quality of life from a very special view, but I think it's for everybody. Is this quality of life in mobility very important, because mobility is a kind of a breathing. Yeah, we breathe it like air, and we think it's always there, but that's not true. Think of the prison. Prison means no mobility, and that's it. No individual mobility, nothing else. So mobility quality, the mobile quality of life, that's important, very important. We try to put into it the European quality of life point of view, so nothing too big and so on. And the second one, we need therefore innovative technologies, that's for sure. Second one, important, freedom of choice means that this multimodal transportation should be available, not only one kind of mobility. This is now one thing, but I think we should take the next slide because it should be short. And if you look at the stages in the development of mobility culture is an old thing. It's 100 years old, or 125 for motorized mobility. Then we have the early phase until the Second World War. It was in the 20s, for example, or 1900, it was a complete chaos. Yeah, the traffic mobility was very diverse, was walking, horses, everything. It was very dangerous. If you watch old movies, if you see people having very much fun in that. They're all laughing and so on and experimenting. So risk-taking was a common praxis, but it was totally dangerous, and the traffic rules were emerging, mobility cultures were forming. The second stage, golden age of motoring, I called it, in the 60s, the city planning was there, that these zoning, these separated areas of living and buying things and working and so on, and were totally separated. The urban sprawl started on a large scale. We have highway systems, we have rules and regulations, and the mobility cultures which were forming in the beginning of the century, they were fixed then. Yeah, they were finished. Everything was in place. We had traffic was centered on the automobile. Walking was, people didn't like to walk anyway. Yeah, everything should be automatic. Additional traffic systems like rail and air travel were perfected and very strongly regulated, especially in the US. And okay, the quality of life in this time rises dramatically through mobility, because people have their own home and so on and travel between that. Today now, the third stage is globalization, the megacity growth. New York is an ongoing global role model for building large cities. Business center in the middle and then sprawl in the outside, and highways in between, very, very dynamic. That's New York. But it's the last appearance, I think. We have this mass migration into cities, and now first time that's the case, that traffic threats the quality of life instead of make it better. What we can see, that now the people are talking about the dawn of a new diversity, that the monoculture of the traditional car is questioned. People like to have more. They have cycling, they're walking and everything. They like to have everything. And even trams, the old trams are there. And what we can see, we have from our order there, we have a new chaos now. Yeah, we have traffic as a threat and a pillar. We can't avoid traffic because we are living in the outskirts, for example, but it's threatening us. So these chaos, order, and chaos, and the merging pattern now, and there we are in this smart city topic, is to make from these order from these chaos. And like it, the last slide again.
This one?
Yeah, go back. Because if you like to have this new diversity, so this multimodal diversity, everybody is running around and cycling, and with children, everything is a chaos again. Then we don't like to have a chaos like that, where it's unsafe and unpleasant for the people. We need it safe, and therefore this information and communication technology comes in place. We guess, though, that with the smart city idea and these sensors all around, and the computing of pictures, to make a semantic on that, this will help us to make here, to organize, to bring this self-organization, this decentralization, this network traffic into reality. So that's very important. So you see today, what is a mobility style? This one is American mobility style. You see that here, the hero on the bicycle. He's alone, and the space is too large for him to cover. You have these unwalkable cities to the right. The next one, this one is cycling. You see cycling itself. The people like to cycle in the European way. This one is the same cycling, but it's uncool. People try to avoid that. That's cycling in Beijing. Nobody likes that. Even if the same bicycle, like in the right way. I like this quality of life thing. And the last one, it's kind of funny. You can see that Copenhagen is always talk that Copenhagen is a special city, and you can see they developed their culture of mobility since in 60 years. Now this one is 1937, and this one is 2010. You can see this is always the same. Yeah, they have their own. They have made their own culture, and some American tourist is commenting on that, and he sees totally embarrassed that the people are cycling there because it's so outmoded.
We must wait until the various places of business close, and then we will see a demonstration of bicycle traffic that has of the day is over, and the whole population seems to suddenly appear on wheels.
See, it's slightly dangerous too. Yeah, it's a longer movie, but it's very enjoyable. But what I want to show you was there are cultures, mobility cultures. The people behave, and we are in need now to make these chaos safe again.
This is a wonderful setup for some of the work from the Sensible Cities Lab, because the problem, which is, okay, we've now arrived at this new chaos, and we want to use technology and smarts to improve things, is some of the work that you've really been doing. And the first project is Copenhagen Wheel, which actually picks up in the same city and the same problem. So Carlo and Saf, pick the story up from there.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Can we see the next slide? Well, Copenhagen is really a surprising city. That's what you see usually and what we saw before. It's interesting, however, we saw Copenhagen in the 30s, bikes and a few cars. We didn't see Copenhagen in the 60s. That was a city full of cars. And then you go there today, and it actually like this. It's a city where half of every trips every day, more or less, is done by bicycle. Before showing you the project we did there, however, I just want to say a couple of words on what we do at the Sensible City Lab at MIT. Well, we are all familiar with the changes that affected our life, the way we meet friends, the way we do work, the way we organize, the way we connect, the way we do everything in our life over the past 20 years. It has been a very, very big change. Think about even the way we collect information today compared to 20 years ago. Well, we believe that this is going to have an impact on cities equal or even greater than the impact that the Industrial Revolution had on cities a couple of hundred years ago. So the digital revolution is actually now affecting physical form in a very profound way. And that's what we're looking at the Sensible City Lab. Now, out of this broader field, in the group, we got a group in Boston, in Singapore, kind of 30 people in Boston, 10 in Singapore. We got sociology, mathematicians, designers. And what we're looking here is just one slice of the broader picture, which is today is how is all of this allowing us to involve people more, to use technology in order to really connect people, people who can self-organize and participate into the governance of the city. So here, a couple of projects. What we saw before is how we can actually collect information about the environment, about a place that might have a problem, might have a graffiti, might be not accessible, and that information can be shared and then be used in order to improve the community. Well, what we did here is a couple of projects where actually information is automatically collected. And this is building upon the fact that our environment, all the things we use, all the objects are becoming smarter and smarter. In this case, in Copenhagen, by looking really at what we just saw, so something very simple, old-fashioned, and that's a bicycle. So what could you do today with a bicycle? Add ubiquitous computing in trying to transform the experience of the bicycle and transform it into a device that perhaps can change the way it is being used and the way people collect data and share it with the community. So that was the brief. we were given by the mayor of Copenhagen a couple of years ago, and this is what we came up with in the next video.
Welcome to the Copenhagen Wheel. The wheel that turns your ordinary bike into a smart electric hybrid. But the Copenhagen Wheel is more than a new type of electric bicycle. It's also a smart sensing device that provides real-time feedback about the environmental conditions in your city. Here's how it works. As you cycle, sensors inside the wheel analyze the levels of carbon monoxide, NOx, and noise in your surroundings, also collecting information on ambient temperature, relative humidity, and road conditions. Through your phone or on the web, you can monitor the quality of air you're breathing while cycling, or how well you're performing physically. That's not all. You can keep this data for your personal use, or share it with friends, gaining access to a larger pool of information. You can also make a bigger contribution through your daily commute, and share your data anonymously with the city. When many cyclists donate the information their wheel is collecting, your city gains access to a new set of fine-grained environmental information. Through this, your city can cross-analyze different types of environmental data on a scale that has never been achieved before, build a more detailed understanding of the impact of transportation on a city's infrastructure, or study dynamic phenomena like urban heat islands. Ultimately, this type of crowdsourcing can influence how your city allocates its resources, how it responds to environmental conditions in real time, or how it structures and implements environmental and transportation policies. So turn on your life and turn on the city. The Copenhagen Wheel.
So this was actually the wheel last year when we presented it in Copenhagen at the Climate Summit. That's one of the prototypes in Copenhagen. In the next slide, you see a more detailed view. Basically, previous slide, thanks. So it's just a hub. You change the hub in your city, in your bike. You can retrofit any bike, and then the bike will get energy when you brake, and then use this energy in order to do some of the things we just saw before. Another project along the same lines, how the things we use can become smarter and help us monitor and understand the environment, is a project we're working on at the moment. It's called CO2Go. But if you take a smartphone, any smartphone, you might not be aware, but you're carrying with yourself all the time a number of sensors. You're carrying accelerometers, GPS, a microphone, and so on. And the question here is, well, can we actually use all of this information in real time in order to understand the mode of transportation and ultimately detect your CO2 emissions? Can we do an automated CO2 emission detector that you just keep in your pocket and will understand how you're moving, and as a result of that, how much CO2 you are emitting? It's a project we're doing with SNCF, the French railway company. Next slide. So basically you take all these sensors, you take the signature, like you see at the top, how they actually change over time, so the accelerometer, the microphone, and so on. You combine all of that with some machine learning algorithms, and then you can actually see how you're moving, how many calories you're burning, and ultimately how much CO2 you're emitting. And here again, there's a short video showing the thing. This both projects just as a way to see how our objects, our daily things, what we use are becoming smarter, and as such they can become a way to really collect information about our environment and share it with other people. I think, you know, now the next thing one can do is actually look at other types of data collection that become more implicit, that don't really even need the users in this process. But then I'll leave it back to Peter and Asaf.
Right. So, you know, Asaf, as we've had conversations and over the last year, what's become clear is so many of these projects start by measuring and sensing, and you just, the minute you start ubiquitously sensing things in the environment, you learn so much you can start changing things. And then your later projects start feeding back on how do you change the built world. I think you're going to talk about Trash Track now.
Yeah, I'll mention a quick thing about that relates to the involvement of individuals here. If we're thinking of a smart city, and we're looking at the discussion as it's evolved over the past 2 years, really there are a lot of entities becoming part of this process, whether it's the large corporations who might be interested in actually wiring up cities with information, with the IT and the infrastructure, the healthcare, the public transport, the big telco service providers. Cities are becoming interested in retrofitting themselves with information, using it really as a key infrastructure. A lot of the times you see that discussion focusing on the top-down management of place. So, you know, if your bus could synchronize with the subway and the light would change at the right time, our city would function better. But really, unless you engage people in that feedback loop, you're not going to be able to actuate the majority of what happens in the city. At the end of the day, people are the ultimate actuators of place. So if you can start closing feedback loops where we can receive information in real time about, you know, where is there energy available, where is the public transport, where are our friends, where are the objects that we're interested in, and make smarter decisions based upon this, then we'll start seeing processes that make the city a new place. Really, it creates a new experience of place. And if you think about all this data coming together and being made available on APIs so that applications can lie on top, then all of a sudden you have the ability to create mashups that can activate physical space. So similar to what we do today in the virtual space on the internet so well, engaging anything from a hacker to the biggest company in actually collecting different types of information and offering a new service. Imagine this penetrating the urban space. Has an impact on the role of government, on the experience of cities, and many other things. Now this project in some way touches on this. We're looking at one question, which is, where does our trash actually go? So we decided to study one of the more complex waste removal systems in the US, in Seattle. And there we partnered with Waste Management and Qualcomm and Sprint to actually study the movement by attaching sensors. Sensors we developed at MIT and then with Qualcomm to people's trash. 500 households in Seattle collected about 3,000 items of trash. And then we stapled little sensors that can tell you anywhere in the world where they are for a year based on one charge. And created these maps that show us where our trash is in real time and where it ultimately ends up. Let's see the video and I'll recap afterward. This is the state-of-the-art facility by Waste Management in Baltimore for sorting trash. This, by the way, is the first time we're sharing the full set of traces of all the types of trash that we collected. That's the Seattle region. Here we're looking more at the state level with Oregon on the side, on the bottom. That's the entire US. mostly e-waste and the household hazardous waste are the ones that travel farther.
So, Asaf, we should, as you mentioned, this is the first time you've publicly shown all that great stuff, and as I understand it, that's been recognized by folks as a really interesting visualization.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. It was recognized by folks that don't allow us to say it was recognized, but it will be published soon. By
Okay,
those,
good.
By
Well, we'll
folks.
just move on from there. We're glad that you shared it. There was So there's some really interesting, significant data that came out of that, which is that the ordinary trash went local, but I guess because of various incentives that exist in recycling or in e-trash, all the e-trash starts taking these long trips. What are the things that you learned, and how does that start feeding back into how either people behave differently or people in the trash, supply or reverse supply side behave differently?
So, I mean, if we look at it from the system standpoint, using these tags, we could suddenly map out a system that was not necessarily all clear. So we can see that we've learned to recycle very well plastics and paper and glass and metal, all the stuff that stays in the Seattle region, handled by the waste removal company, by Waste Management there, is making its way to its end destination very, very quickly. Some of the things that are newer to arrive, like electronic waste, we produce so much of it, yet the removal process of this type of waste today involves many links in that type of removal chain. It goes to a store, then it goes to another service provider and another, and then it goes at the end to a recycling facility, and creates this big demand for mobility. So these things move around. And there was not, at any point, a single entity that could tell us, this is what the system looked like. These are how many people involved. These are the companies involved. This is where it's supposed to go. So we could really bring that to light in some way.
You know, we've arrived at this moment where clearly we want to get lots more people involved in their city. And Dennis, you've turned the city into a game with Foursquare. So you must look at the problem everyone's here trying to solve and what you've learned in building out your thing and kind of from the perspective of the gamification of cities and actually seeing what people are doing, kind of how do we start approaching that and what have you learned so far?
Yeah, so, I've been working in location-based services, specifically how they apply to cities for a number of years. My current project is called Foursquare. Before this, I was working on a startup called Dodgeball. And then before that, I was hacking on my own, and I worked for a startup called Vindigo. And it was, it's all about trying to build these things that allow people to track their experiences through cities and put, a lot of those experiences into structured data sets so they can share them back with other folks. And, it's been tough just because, it's just difficult to get people to experiment with a lot of these things, because of, emerging technologies or people, have to remember to pull out their phones and check in. A lot of what we're doing with Foursquare uses game mechanics to kind of incentivize people to do that in different ways. But what we're finding now with like the big data set that we have with Foursquare is, it's not just about looking at a city from top down and seeing, a bunch of moving dots that represent, people that kind of be checking in and moving around and connecting with folks. But it's about, giving physical objects, specifically places in different cities, the ability to communicate back with users. So a big part, like yesterday I gave a talk on like what we're doing with Foursquare and how we're, using it to help, help local merchants connect with users. But, underneath everything is this platform that enables places really to have like a sense of memory and the ability to communicate with not just other users but the ability to communicate with other technical structures, right? So every place in all the cities that Foursquare has a presence, like it's got a history of the people that have been there, the data that's the experiences that people have had there, and you can query that stuff in real time and kind of pull back who's at this place right now, who's been here more than anyone else, like what are the paths that people travel through various cities, like. And I think one of the bigger questions is like for any given user, what does it mean for that user to be at that place at that specific time? And how can we use that data to help them navigate their way through different parts of the city?
Asaf, one of the things this raises is kind of the role of government begins to change. Government used to collect data and run services. And of course, when you go to a service-oriented architecture, lots of different entities can jump in and participate. So kind of how does the role of government as doing things to versus setting specs that then let other actors behave, how does that start to evolve? And maybe we get a little discussion on that.
Well, I mean, just to use a tangible example, let's take, for example, what could arise from a project like this trash. So imagine what happened is, that wasn't mentioned in this video, is people threw their trash away, as they would have otherwise, and immediately they received a real-time map with where their garbage is, until it reached its final destination. So think about, if you had access to this information from the top, if an application could actually use this data, but could also have access to other types of data in the city, for example, the movement of garbage trucks. You can very easily imagine providing a service, inviting the private sector to actually get involved in providing the service of trash collection. That could be probably better, more innovative, look at the problems that emerge from what this data is telling us. So if you have that ability, that type of ability to participate, to intervene, suddenly, if the mayor doesn't anymore need to decide when and how trash is collected, but it's taken care of by the private sector, the city hall really, or the regulator in general, really needs to start inserting processes that will ensure equity, that will look at safety and security, that will incentivize and catalyze the participation of the commercial and the private sector. So it really changes, first of all, the challenges and the type of activities that government needs to be engaged in order to create this, make this happen.
One of the hopeful things in the last couple of years has been the whole open data, open government movement, where cities have opened up their data and APIs, and hackers have started to come in and create things. Do you see that in the Foursquare world, where people are using your location stuff together with government data to hack things up and build new solutions?
We've seen a little bit of it, not as much as I'd like to. I think it's important that Foursquare just provides a tiny little window into all the data that's happening in the city. I live in New York, and we've seen New York do some interesting things. They have this contest. I think it's called the Big Apps Contest, where New York City recently opened up a lot of their data sets, and they're encouraging developers to go in there and hack together things that specifically are supposed to make the experience of living in those cities, more interesting to people and easier, making cities easier to use. And so it's everything from opening up, bus schedules and opening up transit schedules. And if you guys 311 is in New York, you can complain to anything by dial 311. Opening up a lot of those data sets, just through APIs and allowing people to build apps on top of them. So one of the interesting things I saw is New York opened up the what was it, the restaurant cleanliness survey or whatnot. So you would a restaurant either has 1 or 5 stars based upon how sanitary the kitchen is, and someone hacked together something on Foursquare. So once you check in, if you're at a restaurant that has less than 2 stars, it sends you a text message telling you to get out and go somewhere else, right? So that's some data from the city, and it's a little bit of data from Foursquare, but the art is taking all these different data points from all these different services and matching them up.
There's a really cool backstory to all of this. About 2 months ago, there was something called the Great Urban Hackathon, and it went on in New York at IBEAM and in San Francisco at Gray Area Foundation for the Arts. And the Knight Foundation helped fund it because they believe that in journalism in the 21st century, journalists have to be able to work with data. So in about 36 hours, 16 projects were created in both cities. And what was interesting was it was artists, hardware, software types, journalists, designers, and urban activists. Here they are in San Francisco getting to work. And they followed in this 36 hours real design principles. So they actually went out into our community. We're in the Tenderloin. They don't all have iPads, but they were interviewing the residents. They were coming up with various projects like, how do you use SMS services to teach people things, because folks don't all have access to computers. This, Dennis, is actually the mashup of the Roach thing. So this is the restaurant data, and the darker it is, the more Roachly it was. And I knew they did this. I didn't realize they went further and then did the mashup where they took this data and your check-in data and they told you where you were if it was very Roachly. That's very, very cool. Here's another one they did. This is New York City taxi data, and what you see is in 24 hours, the gray lines were fare amounts. So in the middle of the night, you are paying more. And the length of the trip based on the time of day. And all of this is because taxi data is flowing out of GPS stuff, and then people could assemble it and do interesting things. And this all comes out of this open data movement. We need to wrap up pretty quickly here. Go ahead.
I wanted to add a point, because you asked about governments and collecting data and so on. Especially we, with WheelMap, found out that every city is collecting its own data. So it's very hard to get onto this data. And I mean, if you're a tourist like me in Munich, I don't know as a wheelchair driver where to look. So the data is not open. It's not open data. And I think if it's something about quality of life, and if the government gets our taxes, I think most of the data that are not personally identified or something like that should be open. And we should agree on standards how we could exchange those platforms so that even Foursquare or some other apps can use it and build up a game out of it. And only by ubiquity, so only by having the data everywhere available when I need them, we can really make something big out of it.
It strikes me as this is a particularly interesting opportunity in the EU, because in the U.S., we do not believe as much in things like centralized regulation or, okay, everybody have to go do something in a particular way. But here, because it's a little bit more socialist and because actually, you know, there's kind of more of a you can actually do more with regulations. It strikes me that the ability of the government to set a direction and then have capital and a lot of ideas flow, there may be a lot that we can see here. And haven't we seen a lot of this innovation come from Europe for reasons like this?
Well, as far as our lab goes, we know that the conversation has gone very deep when it comes to European cities. The response was good, but also the ability to explore this opportunity really emerged first. So cities like Copenhagen, like Amsterdam, like London, like Lisbon, we've worked with a lot of them here, and I think they get the point. And what you're mentioning, I think, is also a great point for Europe when it looks at new types of innovation, because it could involve the private sector in a new way. If the right regulation is put in place, right incentives to actually invite this type of participation, this type of activation of physical space using softwares and apps, then you'll be able to see a whole bunch of new interesting business models and services offered. And there's no reason why Europe shouldn't be able to jump on this amongst the first.
But as we finally wrap up, Carlo, there's one more video that we have, and you know, we talk about how do you get people involved in the design. Yesterday, Kevin Kelly and a bunch of folks were presenting really interesting, you know, things that there are just patterns in our lives, patterns to technology, you know, patterns on how cities grow. And you've actually started looking at, can we understand some of these patterns and use them to help us in the design? So why don't you bring that up for us?
Well, you know, all of this, all of what we saw this morning is about how we can actually deliberately, you know, when we take information about the environment, upload it and share it, how can we do it automatically? When you think about CO2Go, the Copenhagen Wheel, how can we do it through other systems like in Trash Track or Foursquare? Now, what happens when you have all of this data? Now, there's a big question about cities. And the question is the following. Cities didn't exist once upon a time. 7,000 years, then magically they start, they come to life. And for several thousand years, still approximately 200 years ago, cities grow in a natural way, in an organic way. City grows by a number of feedback loops whereby you build something and then you see how it works and you keep on modifying it slowly, slowly. Now, at one point after the Industrial Revolution, what happens is that things need to be built much faster. And because of that, then we cannot use a traditional way of building anymore. We cannot use the organic cities anymore. And we go to top-down built cities. This is what we've been doing over the past 200 years to build cities top-down. This is the example of, say, Brasilia, city designed from the top, the example of Chandigarh by Corbusier in India. Most of the cities and the extensions, urban fabric we build today is top-down. Now, there's a big problem with top-down built cities that they lack all of the richness that comes from bottom-up, and there's plenty of examples. Peter started with some pictures from Brasilia. Brasilia was described by Simone de Beauvoir as an expanse of endless monotony because it doesn't reflect the richness of cities. Well, just to wrap up all of this, our hypothesis is that today, for the first time, we can actually leverage new technology in the richness of data we collect in order to go back to build cities in an organic way, to let them evolve with the participation of citizens and in a kind of algorithmic bottom-up way. And there's a 30 seconds of a video. It's the first time it's been shown. It's for a project that will be unveiled in a few weeks. But just to show you what this could, just an example for a new city to be built in the Gulf.
Nurturing a city from the nutrients of its environment, growing it like a plant from its soil. Our proposal deploys a groundbreaking digital algorithm using powerful computation to accelerate traditional city growth, rapidly evolving the optimum solution.
Was that it?
No, I think there's a problem with the
did my computer screw up?
With the computer, but you get the idea. So
sorry about that. So it's only left us with a greater taste for what you're going to unveil in a few weeks, which is a city that learns and evolves itself. We're pretty much out of time, so I think what we need to do is wrap up now, and of course everyone will be here for conversations afterwards. I want to thank you very much, and this was, in a way, just a taste of what I think is going to be a very, very important topic in times to come, which is the same energy and open systemsness that we've seen fuel the information technology world, the social media world, and the architecture of the internet needs now to be applied to cities. And more than ever, for individuals, this is not something your city does to you or you sit back and watch. Good governance has always been about engagement and involvement, and now that needs to engage us in the design and the technology and how we use the stuff responsibly, and it's a great moment of hope. I want to thank you all for sharing it, and thank you very much today.